Okay, if you've listened to or watched any of my recent videos, you may have heard me banging on about facial recognition and something called parallel construction. Well, I finally got to making the video, and if you prefer, or as well as, if you like, there will be a video linked in the description, and a defence attorney, it's at a seminar about mass surveillance, I think it's generally about, and yeah, it's three defence attorneys who are speaker experts in this field and who are speaking to a room full of defence attorneys. And I would say the first sort of 15 minutes is actually the best bit, and the beginning and the end, and then I think it might go a bit, I don't know, depends how much you want to delve into it, really. But yeah, if you just want a short video, I think you could just watch the first 15 minutes and you get the general gist. But if you would like to stay with me right now, I'm going to, they refer to this, there is actually a paper called Dark Side, or The Dark Side, I don't know if it's called Dark Side or The Dark Side, and there might be a link to it in this, so I will put this in the description as well. And I was going to put something else. Now, and there's another video which I won't go into detail. It's interesting. It sort of shows a little bit how the mainstream media are being sort of kept under the thumb of the authorities. Basically, it's about freedom of the press, and it's, social media are getting demonized. It doesn't mention anything about that in it, but we are, and being characterized as a bunch of idiots, basically, and that's insulting, because that's characterizing a lot of citizens as idiots, and the people watching the videos. But people don't just want to keep hearing what's regurgitated, or what's regurgitated. They want, if possible, to get the full picture. And it's good to do both, to cross-reference things, because otherwise you live in an echo chamber. So, anywho, I'm going to carry on. I'm going to begin this. And, as I say, there are links in the description if you prefer to watch watch that seminar, or just watch it as well. Okay, so secret origins of evidence in US criminal cases. Now, we've seen in the Kohberger case that there are concerns over the fact that the prosecution seem like they don't want to share things, or maybe their hands are tied due to some sort of agreement with the FBI, and maybe who knows who else might be involved, what other agencies might be involved, so this links quite well with it. And there's also another article that I'm gonna either, if this one's not too long, I'll go on to that one as well, because that one is directly regarding parallel construction and the Bryan Kohberger case. So I'm going to skip this bit, because I think you really need two people to read it for it to sound, but you can read it over yourself. It's basically sort of an example of a conversation between a judge and a prosecutor, and I think I feel like we'll just get straight into it. In the United States today, a growing body of evidence suggests that the federal government is deliberately, and this isn't some kind of conspiracy theory, this is happening, and if you Google parallel construction and put law after it, otherwise you're going to get some kind of grammar thing. Parallel construction, and then put the word law after it, and you will come up with a lot of hits, and you will see defence lawyers talking about this. So let me read that again. In the USA today, a growing body of evidence suggests that the federal government is deliberately concealing methods used by intelligence or law enforcement agencies to identify or investigate suspects. And if you watch the facial recognition video, which I'm going to put out at the same time as this, you will find out that facial recognition is being used without recognition, ironically. Prosecutors do not have to disclose that they used it in court, which is unbelievable. And 50% of the US citizens are actually in a facial recognition database, according to the article that I read in that video, and I'll put the link in the description of that as well. Okay, so deliberately evidence suggests that the federal government is deliberately concealing methods used by intelligence or law enforcement agencies to identify or investigate suspects, including methods that may be illegal. It does so by creating a different story about how agents discovered the information. And as a result, people may be imprisoned without ever knowing enough to challenge the potentially rights-violating origins of the cases against them. Through a practice known as parallel construction, an official who wishes to keep an investigative activity hidden from courts and defendants, and ultimately from the public, can simply go through the motions of rediscovering evidence in some other way. For example, if the government learned of a suspected immigration-related offence by a person in Dallas, Texas, through a surveillance program it wished to keep secret, it could ask a Dallas police officer to follow the person's car until she committed a traffic violation, then pull her over and start questioning her, and later pretend this traffic stop was how the investigation in her case started. Due to parallel construction, it's not just traffic stops that are being used though. Due to parallel construction, defendants, but obviously, sorry interrupting again, but obviously we saw Bryan Kohberger stopped a couple of times and stopped once before. So the question is whether the first one was nothing to do with it because it was before the crime. So if you're on the side of you think that Bryan Kohberger might be innocent, actually it wouldn't matter either way. It could be that for some reason they had surveillance on him already. For some reason, who knows? I think that's unlikely. I think it's more likely that the subsequent ones, because there was 2 in a row, wasn't there, in Indiana? And when you watch them, it kind of feels like something else might be going on. But who knows? Because these traffic stops are happening all the time. And that could be in relation to facial recognition. They're getting a database of everybody's pictures. and I've also said this in another video, that I suspect that it's at least a possibility that they were trying to obtain Brian Kohberger's DNA through the traffic stops. It was 3 traffic stops on the way, wasn't it? Because obviously there was the one as they were leaving. I don't know about the first one, but I don't know. I don't know about any of them, do I? But with one of the traffic stops, it could just be, completely innocuous, but the way that the officer, it was the first one in Indiana, the way that the officer took the driving license and then he was holding it out of sight above the, on the roof of the car. And he was kind of really like leaning in and like leaning over the car. And if you compare it with the traffic stop with the female officer at Washington State, she doesn't, I suppose she wouldn't as a female, perhaps less likely to be leaning all over the car. But both of those officers were actually leaning all over the car. I know it was hard to hear where they were, but I thought, wow, climb in the window, why don't you? Like, it was, I felt like there was a bit of touchy-feeliness of the car, and then with the first one, with the licence, but I digress. So, due to parallel construction, defendants in criminal cases across the country may be experiencing serious infringements of their rights without their knowledge. The United States Constitution draws on lessons learned from the abuses of the British colonial era. It's our fault. In placing firm restrictions on how the government can behave when it wants to prove someone has done something wrong. It establishes criteria for rights respecting searches and seizures, requires the prosecution to turn over to the defence any evidence favourable to the accused, and demands that all trials and proceedings take place in accordance with due process. That is fundamental fairness. However, parallel construction, when sustained through the end of proceedings, means defendants cannot even learn about and therefore cannot challenge government actions that violate these or other rights. I might read that again. I think I read that in a little bit of got the inflection wrong on it. I don't want to change the meaning of it. However, parallel construction, when sustained through the end of proceedings, so when they keep it up the whole time, they keep up the facade, means defendants cannot learn about and therefore cannot challenge government actions that violate these or other rights. In creating fictions to keep potentially questionable investigative activities out of sight. Now you can be wondering what sort of activities and why would they want to keep them out of sight, and it'll come on to that. The government also avoids an important deterrent to official misconduct, because if you let everybody do this and you just assume because these people are all held to the same, if you just assume that there's no bad apples, well, that's just a hiding to nowhere, because we all know there's bad apples in every walk of life, in every job, in every company, and so and bad apples can grow as well if you give people too much freedom. Not what I'm talking about is well, that's what they think, if you give people too much freedom. But if they are allowed too much freedom, then they start thinking that they're above the law. And where does it end? I'll try and keep on task though. Sorry. This impact is not limited to criminal defendants. If government agents can potentially create privacy violating, discriminatory or otherwise unlawful programs or patterns of behaviour in secret and without facing any negative consequences, the rights of every member of the public are in jeopardy. Taken to its worst logical conclusion, parallel construction risks creating a country in which people and communities are perpetually vulnerable to investigations based on prejudice, vast illegal operations, or official misconduct, but have no means of learning about these problems and holding agents to account. And it feels a little bit like that's what's going on at the moment with this Kohberger case, because if there's no big deal, if everything's fine, what's the big deal? And it just sticks in my throat for them to use privacy when we read this. When we look at the facial recognition, the fact that there's 50% of the US population on a facial recognition database, and don't take my word for it, look at that video that I'm going to put out on facial recognition, read the article and cross-reference and look other places as well. So they're saying that it's privacy reasons, and it's Bryan Kohberger's relatives anyway. Obviously, some of them he will not know, but it's just BS, isn't it? What is it really? Of particular concern is the potential use of parallel construction to hide intelligence surveillance programs. Modern US intelligence surveillance is as sweeping as it is secretive, and a lack of disclosure of the use of such surveillance in criminal investigations means wide-ranging or acute civil liberties violations may go unnoticed, and they are. This is happening. Parallel construction also means judges may never evaluate whether government uses, this is important, parallel construction also means judges may never evaluate whether government uses of constantly evolving surveillance techniques adhere to the US Constitution and laws adopted by Congress, as is their role in the US system. So the judge should be deciding what can be used in court. And it seems to be that the prosecutors are acting like gatekeepers. Well, that's what seems to be happening in the Kohberger case anyway. For example, if the government were to identify a suspect in a robbery by scrutinising a store's security video using a new but flawed facial recognition technology it does not want to reveal, it could send an informant to talk to the suspect and report what he said. I mean, how do you even know that person's telling the truth? Then suggesting in court records that this conversation was how the investigation began. I don't think. I know that they use confidential informants, but I just think they use people who've got criminal history. But those people would be, if they were, you'd be encouraged to disregard their testimony if they were on the side of the defence. to diminish their credibility. Right, Virginia. Hold on, No, I missed this bit. Right, hang on. I haven't finished with this facial recognition part. Such possible uses of parallel construction are especially troubling in human rights terms because new technologies may be inaccurate. They need to be rigorously tested, including in the case of facial recognition software. I don't trust technology. My phone is always letting me down all the flipping time. I just made a video that I uploaded, and then I realised that for some reason the text had gone massive and half of it, so it was basically magnified, and the images weren't in sequence with what I was saying, which they 100% were when I made the video. So I remade it and I checked that everything was okay. I uploaded it and it's done it again. Well, it hasn't magnified it this time, but the images aren't in sequence with what I'm saying. So I'm talking about something where the image should have gone on to the next image. I don't trust technology. Just weird shit happens with it. That's something, what I was doing is something I've done lots of times on videos. I wasn't doing something different. So why is it fucking up this time? I was going to say pissing up, but that's not really a thing, is it? Unless judges are aware that such new technology has been used, they will not be able to assess whether the technology violates rights or how reliable it is. Virginia-based defence attorney, and this is the issue with the DNA as well. I can't remember what I was watching, but I think I was watching a video, or I might have been reading something regarding. No, it was a video. I'll put it into the description, and if I forget to put something in the description, please remind me, because I sometimes forget to do that. I think it was a TED talk or something like that, and this guy, he was obviously an expert in forensics, and basically he was explaining how different labs can come to different conclusions on the same piece of DNA, and there's been studies that have found this. So it's not as objective as we're all led to believe. Virginia-based defence attorney Jessica Carmichael, who has represented a client in a case that gave rise to concerns about potential parallel construction, told Human Rights Watch the practice flies in the face of everything that our justice system stands for, referring to the Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution, which is intended to protect the population against abusive searches and seizures by the authorities. She continued, essentially, this practice is an attempt to circumvent that. It's a way that defendants can't challenge the evidence and the way that it's obtained. Other defence attorneys told Human Rights Watch that parallel construction encourages law enforcement to be duplicitous and risks destroying the essence of Fourth Amendment protections. Other defence attorneys told Human Rights Watch that parallel construction encourages law enforcement to be duplicitous. Human Rights Watch investigated parallel construction from April 2016 to October 2017 using interviews, court records, documents disclosed by the government and media reports. In this report, we detail how the practice is is number one, a technique that the evidence suggests is employed frequently and possibly even daily. Number two, has roots in strained and untested government interpretations of US Supreme Court and other cases that in fact have never explicitly provided license for officials to deliberately avoid telling defendants the truth about investigative methods in order to conceal practices that might raise legal concerns. 3, may be employed by a range of federal agencies responsible for investigating suspected violations of criminal and immigration law. What number are we up to? 4. In particular, is employed by a part of the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, known as the Special Operations Division. SOD. SOD. At least part of which has been named the dark side, name of this article, and which the evidence suggests is responsible for passing tips to various law enforcement bodies with the expectation that those tips will not be revealed in court. So is that what's happening with in Kohberger's case? But obviously DEA wouldn't be involved with that, I wouldn't think, unless there's something else going on as well. Regularly relies on pretextual stops. So pretext is, many people will know, but if you don't, is having an excuse for stopping them, like something that is that you're the big one seems to be at the moment that I've seen, including the Bryan Kohberger case, is tailgating, but I've seen that with other cases, so I think that's kind of a I've heard, I was also I think it might have been on the reviews of one of the police agencies that I was reading, and they were being tailgated. So it kind of makes you wonder if that person's trying to push the person who's driving to make a mistake so that they can pull them over. Because it could unnerve you and you could swerve or something like that. Oh, dangerous driving. Regularly relies on pretextual stops and searches of vehicles, an exercise of police powers that is sometimes known as a wall stop or whisper stop, and that risks becoming unlawfully coercive. I mean, there seems to be, I've never known, people don't get pulled over that much in the UK. I cannot believe how many people get pulled over in the USA. I really feel like there's, like, I feel sorry for the citizens of the USA, because it feels like it's really a bit controlling. It feels like it's becoming worse. I worked over in the United States, but only for like a couple of months. And to be fair, it was on a summer camp, and most of the time we were quite out in the sticks, actually. But I was thinking about when we used to drive, there'd be a minibus of us going back and forth from the pub at night. But no, we never got stopped there, and I don't know if that's just because we were out in the sticks, but I'd be interested to know of people how often it does happen. So anybody who is from the USA, how often you get stopped. And like I said in one of my videos recently, that I've never been stopped before, ever, until I just moved recently to a different area. It's not that far away from where I was living before, but it's a different county. And I don't know if it's become a general thing, but I got pulled over, or my driving's just got much worse. But I got pulled over twice within 2 weeks, and I've not been pulled over in 47 and a half years. And then I was pulled over twice in 2 weeks in the same county. And I don't know if it's becoming a bit more heavy on that sort of thing over here. I'd be interested to know from other people in the UK, actually. Or maybe I was just unlucky, or maybe I really was just driving. I was just unlucky because I've driven badly plenty of times, so that can't be the reason. Maybe there's just more police around in this area than. But it's not like I've only lived in one area before, though. I've lived in quite a few areas, and I've never been pulled over. I've lived in about 5 different counties. Right. Sorry, little bit of a personal story there. May also rely on other tactics, such as attempts to find incriminating evidence by obtaining a suspect's consent to a search of his or her person or belongings. So that's another thing that, and I heard it speculated by, there's a video of a local guy talking about common procedures in Idaho, but also recognising that those procedures occur in Indiana and I think Ohio, he mentioned. This local guy, what he thought was that they'd seen Washington plates. Washington, in the minds of the cops, this is what he thought, but obviously there could be an alternative that I'm sure we can all think of. That the cops are very wary of Washington plates because Washington was the first state, one of the first states, if not the first, to legalise weed. And so they often pull anyone with Washington plates over, but obviously there could be the reason that I gave. There could be another reason regarding surveilling Bryan Kohberger in particular, but it could be, as this guy said, because that's been his experience. This guy was a black guy, so could that be another reason that he was more likely to have been pulled over? It's possible. But he said that that because of his dad being in the car, that's why they didn't take it any further. They didn't start searching the car. So in a way, well, you would think that they would, if they were surveilling him, you'd think they'd know that he'd left Pennsylvania with his dad. And I wonder if he knew that he was being surveilled, if he was somehow tipped off. And I'll say that for 2 reasons. One, because his dad flew over there and drove back with him. It could be that he'd had like a bit of a wobble with his mental health, so that might have been a reason why his dad was with him. But then you'd think his dad would be driving then, to be honest, but not necessarily. Like, I mean, I actually find that if I have there have been times when I've had panic attacks, and I've been in a situation where I've had to drive, and actually that's kind of helped, because I've had to do something which doesn't sound the ideal thing to do, drive during a panic attack. I'm not recommending it. It might not work for everyone. I was in a situation where I kind of had to. Well, I guess I didn't have to, but that the fact of having to think about what you're doing kind of forces your brain, it won't always work because it depends how far the panic attack's gone. And it depends how severe the panic attack is, because sometimes it's not your brain that's doing it, it's your autonomic nervous system that's just taken over, and you can't get it under control. And that's another story, as there always is. Like, as I've said before, and I'm going to have to maintain, this is a waffle zone. This is not a place for people who don't like waffle. I'm afraid I will go off at tangents frequently during these videos. So my apologies, but I cannot change that. It is ingrained in me. It is part of the fibre of my being to completely forget what I was talking about also. So where am I? I'm going to have to read that one again. May also rely on other tactics, such as attempts to find incriminating evidence by obtaining a suspect's consent to search his or her person or belongings. Requests for call records which do not require a warrant under US law. Closed proceedings under the Classified Information Procedures Act, or the use of less controversial intelligence surveillance methods to conceal more controversial forms. The use of less controversial intelligence surveillance methods to conceal more controversial forms. So, for example, it could be saying that you're using genetic genealogy, or genealogy if you prefer, and but actually using facial recognition, and then later trying to obtain the yes, it wouldn't be watching the Watchers if my phone didn't get a low battery, because I'm waffling too much. I don't even know what I'm waffling about now. Is at least sometimes used in investigations involving relatively minor offences. Prevents courts from providing oversight over surveillance and other investigative methods, and therefore from deterring law enforcement misconduct. And is facilitated by prosecution tactics for resisting defence attorneys' efforts to find out how the cases against their clients truly originated. I mean, is Kohberger's case even unusual? It seems it to us, but is this just happening all the time? Including prosecution claims that agencies such as the NSA are not part of the prosecution team, and that prosecutors therefore are not required to find out if such agencies were involved in the investigation. The government appears to have developed legal justifications for parallel construction based on theories with which at least some US courts might agree in individual cases. These theories appear to hinge on exceptions to the exclusionary rule. A court developed doctrine under which judges generally will not allow prosecutors to introduce evidence obtained thanks to illegal behaviours. Such evidence, as we know, is known as fruit of the poisonous tree. They may also hinge on prior cases in which courts have allowed the government to conceal the identities of human informants. we've all suspected there may be informants involved, haven't we? And I know a particular person who's been suspected. I might be putting a video out on that person soon, actually. So there's one to watch out for. I started putting it together. However, in making any secret determinations about whether it can legally withhold information about its activities, the government essentially claims for itself the judge's role. Moreover, except in instances in which the government ultimately decides on its own initiative to reveal that it has engaged in parallel construction, court documents reviewed by Human Rights Watch suggest that defendants and their lawyers face a low likelihood of being able to find out whether parallel construction has occurred and challenge the lawlessness of the government's actions in this area. Where the possible use of intelligence surveillance is concerned, the discovery of such information as part of criminal proceedings is essentially the only way a defendant can find out whether she or he may have been unlawfully monitored, since US doctrines related to standing, that is, the ability to establish a right to sue by showing that one has been or will be harmed by a government action. Since US doctrines related to standing make it difficult for individuals who lack strong evidence that they were surveilled to bring suit. I am going to put this into the description, as I said, so feel free to read it then, but I will carry on reading it for anybody who wants to hear all of it. The report concludes that parallel construction violates the right to fair trial proceedings. It also facilitates other potential human rights violations by hiding them from defendants, judges and the public. Depending on the circumstances, these violations may include infringements on privacy rights, as in the case of any unlawful surveillance, defendants' right of access to any evidence the government holds that is favourable to them, and the entitlement to a remedy for government abuses. By shielding official decisions and actions from view, parallel construction may also conceal law enforcement or intelligence activities that violate rights in a discriminatory manner. Society wins not only when the guilty are convicted, but when criminal trials are fair, the US Supreme Court wrote more than 50 years ago in Brady versus Maryland. Parallel construction means society loses. People facing the loss of their liberty may receive unfair trials, and government activities that may violate the human rights of significant numbers of people, or even, as in the case of large-scale surveillance programs, much of the population are shielded from view. This report recommends that the US executive branch prohibit all government departments and agencies from engaging in or contributing to parallel construction efforts, and disclose all policies related to the concealment of sources or evidence. The ODNI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, should also publicly and fully disclose all policies and legal interpretations of the intelligence agencies that may affect criminal defendants or others involved in proceedings before US courts or tribunals. Additionally, the US Congress should require the disclosure to criminal defendants of complete information about the origins of the investigations in their case, with special procedures as necessary to address classified information or information whose disclosure may jeopardize the safety of identifiable human informants. Okay, just a couple more paragraphs. I may as well read to the end now. Human Rights Watch further urges federal and state courts, whenever the circumstances suggest that parallel construction may have occurred, to direct the prosecution to inquire into and disclose any previously unrevealed investigative sources or techniques that were employed as part of the investigation. Defence attorneys, too, should be alert to the possibility that their client's case may have stemmed from undisclosed activities. As a concealment method, parallel construction poses unique research challenges. The point of the practice is to ensure that no one outside of government knows it has taken place. Human Rights Watch's investigation, nevertheless, indicates that this use of secret evidence may be occurring regularly in cases throughout the country, cases in which the person accused of an offence remains innocent or should remain innocent until proven guilty, despite being tried in the press beforehand, and faces a potential life-altering prison term. The report concludes that action is needed immediately to end an aspect of the US justice system that is, in the words of multiple defence attorneys who spoke with Human Rights Watch, a lie. The report, I'm going to miss out the middle bit because I've lost the meaning of the sentence because it was so long. The report concludes that action is needed immediately to end an aspect of the US justice system that is a lie. Well, that could be misconstrued, but I get the point. So I am going to do a separate video because this one was longer than I expected. I'm going to do a separate video. So genetic genealogy, Brian Kohberger, and parallel construction in the Idaho 4 investigation. So that I'll put it into the description in that video. So not this video, in the video regarding this particular article. So you would be able to listen to it on here if you wanted to, or you can listen to me, or you can just read it yourself. So there you go, you've got quite a few options, and I might put a few more articles in to both the descriptions in both of these videos, so that you can see that this isn't just Human Rights Watch saying this. This isn't just a load of softy lefties. I'm not calling them softy lefties, but I can imagine that's what some folk may believe them to be. It's not just them. It's a problem. So, and you'll see that from the amount of links I probably do put in. So many thanks for listening, and congratulations for getting through to the end of my video. And I really do recommend that if you do find this interesting, and even if you don't, I'd really recommend that you watch that, at least the first sort of the first speaker in the, I don't know if it's a seminar or what you call it, but regarding parallel construction, 3 defence attorneys, a bit like a TED talk type thing, really. Yeah, and I think the first sort of, it's about 15 minutes. Sarah somebody, she's speaking. She clearly knows her onions, and very interesting. And also this other video that I mentioned, which is regarding basically the police in, I want to say Kansas, but I'm not 100% sure if it was Kansas. Might have been Kansas. Raided this newsroom of a local newspaper, and they upset because the sort of the grandmother or the mother of the guy who ran the place or something like that, she actually ended up dying because she was so upset about it. And it was basically like, it seemed like it was one of these dodgy raids where they'd found an excuse to do it, and it was actually that they were investigating something else. It's all, yeah, interesting. So yeah, check out that video as well. It's Democracy Now! Will be the link. YouTube, it'll be on YouTube, but it'll be a link for Democracy Now! That's also a good YouTube channel, actually. That's where I got the case from Mississippi with the cops torturing those 2 African-American men, the goon squad. Right, okay. So, yeah. And then there'll be the Kohberger video coming out soon, and check out the facial recognition video as well. That's interesting. Okay. That's it for now.